Hello, everyone. Dr. Judy here of Dr. Judy WTF with the Freud, and thank you for tuning in. And for those of you who are not familiar with the show, I'm going to lay down the foundation of my systems way of thinking through the eyes of a mind map before we launch into the topic, which is going to be a very dramatic and traumatic topic of the day is the difference between borderline rage and narcissistic rage. And we're going to make some distinctions here. I invite you to call in and please share. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who have not a lot, but there are some people who suffer from borderline personality disorders, some people who suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, many people who have been in contact with people with these disorders and who also suffer as a result. So the suffering goes 360 degrees, and we're going to look at it from various angles and also look at it from the point of view of how these two disorders pair up and detonate and devastate each other. So just a couple of announcements. I am going to be launching my Mind Map graduate group for those of you who are patients of mine or have graduated from the Mind Map, either the Mind Map video series or the Mind Map experience of therapy. I'm going to begin the group in February, which is actually tomorrow, and it'll be every third Tuesday of February, starting February the 19th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. So please be in touch with the Psychological Healing Center for details, and you can sign up, and this will give you an opportunity to be a part of a group that's evolving, a part of a group that is going to be helping you to self-reflect and self-correct. I'll take the caller in a minute. And also, we are launching Yitz Epstein, my life coach's webinar, which will be taking place on February 10th, and please call the Psychological Healing Center, get more information about this, because this is a way for you to be part of the narcissistic recovery group, even if you don't live in beautiful Sherman Oaks or Los Angeles, California. And we do have a call-in. So hello, you are on the couch with Dr. Judy. What's your name, please?
Hi, this is Marta.
Hi, Marta. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Thank you. And so tell me a little bit about what sparked your interest about this particular topic, and a little bit more about what is bothering you, what's paining you that you want to share with the audience.
Sure. About a year ago, I started seeing a life coach who was really familiar with your book, and she insisted that I get the book. So I did, and I read it, and I loved it, and it really made me rethink and reframe everything that I had learned.
Okay.
And I did put a lot of distance and boundaries between myself and my mother, who is the narcissistic person in my life.
Okay.
So as a result of that, I noticed that I started feeling much better and lighter and freer, and felt the cord was cut.
Yeah.
And I feel much better ever since then. However, I've noticed that she does try to reach me once in a while and lay the guilt trip on me. And my coach has recommended that I don't even contact her anymore, that I just go cold turkey with no communication. Okay. And because it is my mother, I'm just wondering if you feel that that's even something I should consider doing.
Okay. Wow. It is the most asked question amongst the narcissistically injured people that the Psychological Healing Center deals with. And it is not a pat answer in the sense that it's not a one size fits all. I tend to lean toward light contact. I just do, if possible. Now, if you've been sexually molested, beaten, so abused that you can't even look at the person, I do understand how no contact would be the way to go. If it's just devastating to you to have any form of contact for anyone out there, if it's absolutely devastating and it's just a road to hell for you, then please listen to yourself, respect yourself, and by all means put yourself number one. So what do I mean by light contact, Marta? And why do I say I recommend it usually? I do because I think that life is not black and white. So the person who is exhibiting narcissistic features, that person, him or herself, has been injured. And so we have to understand as we do our work that it is not our fault. The way that we are treated is not our fault, and it's multi-generational. And it is everyone's responsibility to clean up and own their own stuff. Some people just don't, or don't know how, or don't even have a pathway by which they can get there. And so I'm thinking, how old is your mother?
92.
92. Okay. And has she done some good things for you along the road of life?
Yes.
Like what? Name a few.
She has cooked my favorite food for me. She has given me gifts on my birthday and Christmas. She has invited me over to her house to join some of her friends for a light lunch. But I've done a lot for her too, and so she has been good to me. But she has high expectations, and everything comes with a price to pay.
Okay, so what's the worst of it? And the topic tonight is narcissistic rage. Have you ever experienced her narcissistic rage?
Absolutely. Okay. When she has asked me to take her to her church, which is not my spiritual path, and I have told her how I felt about her minister and that I did not want to be there and that I had taken her so many times that I just asked her respectfully if she could find somebody else to take her.
Okay.
Because it just did not settle well with me, and she got very upset with that. And another time when I walked out the door after having upset her for some reason, I can't even remember why, she said, "That's why nobody will ever love you, and that's why you don't have a boyfriend right now." And that was very hurtful to me.
No kidding, right. And I always like to know where people are calling from. Where are you calling from, Marta?
Denver, Colorado.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so let's get into this contact versus no contact. So level of abuse, just on a 1 to 10 scale. I know this is kind of a hard one because it's subtle, and as we've been speaking about this type of abuse, it doesn't leave you with physical bruises, it leaves you with psychological bruises. So where would you put level of abuse of her upon your life?
Well, it's not happening anymore because I've cut that cord of not allowing that and setting boundaries. But when it did happen, I would say that it was so hurtful to me that it felt like a 10.
Okay, at the time. Okay, and now you've done work and you don't take it personally, and perhaps you've done a good job of dismantling the negative core beliefs that she's left you with. And so do you want to have any contact, and why, and what type?
I want to have very light contact, like you said, maybe for acknowledging the fact that she's my biological mother. I don't feel connected to her spiritually or emotionally or in any other way but the fact that she's my biological parent, and that's it. So I will acknowledge the fact that she exists and that she is alive and that she did care for me and did the best she could under the circumstances, but she's never done one thing to change, and that woman has been stagnant since the day I was conscious.
And she's 92 years old, and chances are she will not do anything to change. So now I'm going to ask you this. Would it make you feel more dignified? Would it make you feel like a better human being if you did light contact with her?
Yes, it would feel like I was forgiving on a certain level.
Okay.
And that I wasn't really that I know my boundaries, and I know I'm a wonderful person as I am. I don't need her validation. I don't need her.
Okay.
I just have gotten to the point where I feel very healthy. My coach has really helped me through that. I have done a lot of work on myself, and I feel like some light contact would be better than no contact at the appropriate time.
That would absolutely go with that. And let me describe for those of you who don't know what light contact is. I think they call it gray rock. There's an expression out there. I don't use it much, but I've heard it used. Go gray rock. So kind of like you're a rock, you're not really affected by anything is how I interpret that to mean. And so with the narcissistic injury, you don't want to use the you word. You don't want to finger point. And so you don't want to engage in any personal information because it may be and probably will be used against you. And again, the topic of tonight is borderline versus narcissistic rage. And if you set them off, wow, it will go from 0 to 100 miles per hour pretty quickly, and you won't know what hit you because there's no time to prepare. And so this kind of a light contact is more object related. Mom, how is the soup? What did you think of that movie the other night? Mom, remember those beautiful flowers that you were talking about that you love so much? So maybe touched points like Christmas, Mother's Day, birthday, these kinds of things, New Year's, just whatever makes you feel like a dignified human being. Because at this point, the contact that you're giving her is more for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I feel that way.
Okay, and let's not black and white it, because if we go black and white on things, then we're looking at things from not a healthy point of view, because I think the most mature individuals are able to hold a space called ambivalence. No one's so horrible, except maybe some people are so horrible, and no one's so great, okay, including ourselves. And so we have to somehow metabolize the good and the bad of other people, including the good and bad of ourselves. So if there's a little bit of good there, I favor the concept of earnership. So if she earned a little bit, give her a little bit. Okay? Okay, and that's what I would do. And therefore, you accomplish a few things. Number one, you understand that she's in an unhealed state, and her multi-generational injuries were not her fault. Again, I don't say that she's scot-free from owning her own stuff and taking responsibility for it. That particular generation didn't know a lot about mind maps and psychology and self-reflection and self-correction. Okay, this was just not really a popular way to think and process. So you're accomplishing a lot just by being a dignified human being and acknowledging the somewhat that she gave you. Is that helpful to you?
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're so welcome. And I want to know who your life coach is, because I want to thank her for referring you to my book.
Well, her name is Tracy.
Okay.
She lives in Denver. I'm not sure if I want to share her last name with
No
you.
problem.
But maybe I'll send you an email.
Yeah,
or something.
tell her thank you very much. And please note, everyone, that the PDF version of Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect is free. And pay it forward. I'd like people to know about this way of thinking, system gone wrong type thinking, so that everyone out there can psychoeducate themselves and understand the cause behind these horrific reactions to childhood wounds that then manifest as borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. So I'm going to get more into that and the difference between borderline rage and narcissistic rage. So thank you so much for calling in. And also note that we are going to have the webinar starting for those who are in other states and countries with Yitz Epstein on February 10th. And call the clinic or email us and we will notify you. And it's really inexpensive. It's $9.95 to join in. Such a deal. And yeah, and Yitz is wonderful. He's been through narcissistic abuse himself. himself. As a matter of fact, he's been on a few shows, so you can watch the videos where he appears. And so we're trying to do the best that we can at the Psychological Healing Center to psychoeducate people and to offer them support at all levels. And so just note that that's happening, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Judy.
You're very welcome. Take care. Good night. Oh, okay, so I want to read a little bit of an article from Psychology Today. And I don't know who's writing this. I wish I had a person's name on it, but I don't. So here it is. Dear Dr. Heitler, people with BPD don't want to be treated like royalty. They just want to be loved, an emotion which many have never experienced. So you can already hear at the core of the borderline personality pain is a feeling of never really being connected to, a feeling that they never really truly were loved. There's a strong biological vulnerability and often horrific, is there another call in? Okay, thanks. And often horrific abuse, which results in this devastating condition. For BPD sufferers, dysphoria or mental pain is their baseline mood, which can feel unbearable. Their life is hellish. Okay, so let's start with the internal world and what that feels like. This lady is a physician, apparently. As a physician who has worked with borderline personality disorder patients herself and a BPD sufferer personally, I guess she suffers from this, I really appreciate your interest. As a borderline personality disorder sufferer, I want you to know that we are not manipulative, we are desperate. So this is from another angle, an angle of looking at this dis-ease, not from a point of view of these people are out to get you. It sure might feel that way and look that way, but at the core, people who suffer are in deep emotional pain. We don't know how to live with others, how to have friends, and get our needs met the normal way. We simply are ignorant. If you read Freud's classic works, he points out that intense feelings bring about abaissement de niveau mental, which means it clouds judgment to the point of insanity. So one of the terms that I use in my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, and in the mind map system, which I want to go into at this point so we can discuss it through the lens of the mind map, is if you look at the borderline Panel 1, Wounds of Childhood, you will see a lot of abuse and a lot of abandonment. And the reaction to that is excruciating pain. And the encoding of that is something to the effect of, I'm not lovable, I don't matter, I'm not important. That's how radical this is. If you look at the blueprint wounds of the narcissistic core, you will see spoiling, smothering, or you might see demeaning and devalue and destroying of the child, or using the child to aggrandize the parents and to draw supply from that child for the parents' own benefit. So again, I want to emphasize that this is a system gone wrong. So you could see at the core of borderline is a deep, deep fear of abandonment, a deep fear that they are at the core unlovable. At the core of the narcissist is a deep, deep fear that they're going to be exposed, that they're going to lose control, that they're not as great as they're puffing up to be. So it's a different kind of a defense mechanism, and the boundaries are certainly very different. And the encoding for a narcissist might be something like, I'm trying to look really good, but at the core of me, I know that I'm not good at all. And at the core of me, at the deep, deep core, they also fear abandonment. It's just that with the narcissistic shell, they've built up a much tougher shell. And so they appear colder, less vulnerable, whereby the borderline is much more labile. And so the defense mechanisms are a lot more permeable or loose. So I'll go on a little bit more and then refer back to the mind map so that you can see how this system gone wrong works and in essence doesn't work for anybody. So our uncontrollable and horrible emotions deprive us of the ability to think and control our behavior. Because in order for us to be in our logical sense of self, we need some kind of an emotional regulation. If we're emotionally dysregulated, as BPDs are, then the thinking is off. Can't think straight. When we're busy licking our emotional wounds, it's impossible to think straight. Our behaviors are not meant to harm. At least this doctor says not my behaviors. She's not intending to harm anybody. Rather, they are an expression of desperation. Again, she goes on to say, we do not manipulate by cutting ourselves. We cut because pain of being borderline is so intense and so unbearable that the little kick of endogenous endorphins in reaction to acute physical pain is the only thing that brings relief from this horrific mental pain. And I have seen this in my practice time and time again. I have worked with what is termed cutters, and we can break down the defense mechanism of cutting as an attempt to release the emotional pain and convert it into physical pain, because as they're weighing the two, they somehow calculate that the physical pain is more bearable than the emotional pain. So you can see how the whole internal painful world is so horrific, such a life of hell. How bad you would have to feel to want to kill yourself. We feel like it most of the time. Okay, and why does this take place? Severe abuse. There are 5 levels of abuse, 5 types of abuse that I talk about in the mind math system. There's physical abuse, there is verbal emotional abuse, there is sexual abuse, there's neglect, and then there's smothering. In the case of BPD, people are often neglected emotionally. Many of them are emotionally and verbally abused, and sometimes many of these categories are checked when I interview people for the first time. Now, contrasted to the narcissistic core, people who suffer from NPD, number one, they usually don't come to therapy. And if they do come to therapy, they usually blow off the therapy because they're better and smarter and they know more and we're of no value. So usually they don't come to therapy. In the case of the BPD, they do come to therapy. It's just that within the course of the therapy, sometimes they get really dysregulated. And when they get really dysregulated, they start demeaning and devaluing and destroying the therapy, and they, in essence, bite the hand that feeds them. That becomes really sad for them because then they have to go to a different form of therapy, maybe something like dialectical behavioral therapy or some kind of an emotional regulation. Okay, I have a question from the chat room. Thank you very much, and I'd like to answer that. So do you see the difference? One is based in abandonment, and one is based in a kind of a fear of being exposed, a fear of losing control, a fear of being seen as the empty false self that really they try to create to just look like they're and act like they're something. So here's a question. I hope I'm getting this right. What about feeling numb and like you can't love anymore? Okay. So now we're in panel number 5, and let's trace how we got there. So panel 1, wounds of childhood. Okay, reactions to the wounds, which are either shutting down or maybe anger or maybe somatic pains or maybe a combination of all kinds of attempts to start reacting to the wound and beginning to defend. And then the chaos that ensues, the chaos of broken relationships, the chaos of emotional abandonment and so on. And then panel 5, which is, I call those little bubbles are defense mechanisms. And the narcissistic defense mechanism and the borderline defense mechanisms function a little bit differently. So with the borderline, they feel numb because they dissociate. They just decide enough is enough. I'm just going to go bye-bye. And some of them experience some psychotic episodes. So what is psychosis? It's a defense mechanism against extreme abuse. So who would want to be there if they're being raped or beaten? I wouldn't want to be there, so I'd want to say goodbye. And people who go very far away have lost trust in the world, have lost trust in people, and so they totally numb out that way. Now, with the narcissistic core, they put a heart guard on, and they build such a heavy wall around their heart that they numb out that way. So in essence, the narcissist has cauterized his or her feelings. They do not feel love. They do not feel empathy because of their injury. Maybe they've been used by their parents. They feel that they've been so objectified that the only way they know how to relate to people is to use them as objects. And that's why people who have suffered from narcissistic abuse often feel like they are part of the throwaway people. So they might be love bombed at first, and then comes the different stage of feeling like they're addicted to the person, and then that person with the narcissistic core might start devaluing the person and then ultimately discarding the person. So this kind of defense mechanism is a defense against being vulnerable, a defense against being human. And so that's what it looks like. And you're free to call in, by the way. Hopefully I've answered your question. But so let's get back to this rage business, okay? So let me start by an article here by Julia Hall, and feel free to call in and share your experience with the narcissistic rage. Most people, this is Julia Hall, March 4th, 2017. Most people driven to anger begin gradually. Emotionally healthy people give warning signs. Okay, the narcissistic rage. Those familiar with narcissistic rage know that it's always at the surface, so you could feel that heavy energy bubbling, ready to blow far beyond a normal person's anger. And at light speed, the overt narcissist outburst feels like a cataclysmic detonation requiring a duck and cover reaction to sheer survival. So when you set off that person's panel 3 negative core belief, maybe you make them feel unimportant, or maybe you've dismissed them in some manner, or maybe you've put them off the pedestal. Well, watch out, because there comes this ball of rage, and guess who they're projecting it onto? You. So let's trace this back to the cause. Who's the cause of the narcissistic rage? The blueprint. Mom, dad, primary caregiver. Who's the one that gets projected on, both by the borderline and the narcissist? You, the person who sets them off. But the setting off is for different reasons. Remember, the borderline gets more set off by abandonment. The narcissist gets more set off when they feel slighted in any way. Put another way, narcissists are scary as hell to be around, and so are borderlines, because they are always tensed on their way to an eruption. Skipping normal stages of anger, they may leap to 100 miles an hour rage in a half a breath, as flattening as a tornado. And sometimes it can involve physical violence. Adding to the devastation, narcissists never take responsibility for their rage. They have no ability to self-reflect and self-correct, whereas the borderline might feel very guilty and own his or her own stuff, but then get detonated and devastated and start vomiting on the victim again. So, hello, you are on the couch. What is your name, please?
My name is Hamed.
Hamed, hi, how are you? Thank you.
Thank you. I had 2 questions.
Yes.
First of all, I should thank you for your time. And
of course.
My question is that I don't really. I have been. I have been a lost child.
Okay.
And some sort of people pleaser.
Yes.
And And my problem is that I started, consulting with a psychiatrist,
Yes.
and he's very nice. He talks with me very nicely, but I have some sort of problem. I don't trust him very much because I think that he is telling me good words because I'm paying him. He is paid, and because of that, I think that my therapy is not going very well, and I think that that's why I don't have much progress in helping
Okay.
myself.
Okay. A couple of
Okay.
questions. Number one, I always want to know where you're calling from. What part of the world are you calling from?
Now I'm in Japan, and I'm not a native English speaker, so
Okay. Are you
sorry about
Japanese?
my English.
No
No,
problem.
no, I'm from another country.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So also, I ask because there are also cultural wounds. So people from various countries are injured in different ways, and that's something to consider. And one of my
Okay.
dedications to mental health is understanding cultural wounds so that we could put things in a context. And as I like to say to people that I work with from all over the world, just because it's
Yes.
culturally correct, it doesn't mean it's healthy. Okay? So if in one
Okay.
culture they're calling the kids stupid and everyone's doing that, it doesn't mean it's a good idea. Okay? So,
Okay.
number one, are you seeing a psychiatrist who's giving you medication?
No, he's in Iran because I can't speak English very well, so I call him by phone. I
Okay.
have no medications.
Okay, so this is not a psychiatrist, this is
Uh,
probably a psychologist,
a
yes?
psychologist, yes,
Okay.
because I'm not native English speaker, so I made a mistake. Sorry.
Okay, I understand you very well, by the way. Your
Okay.
English is very fine with me, just for you to
Okay.
know.
Thank you.
Okay, why don't people make therapeutic progress? I'm going to tell you my opinion. I'm very opinionated, and the
Okay.
reason is because they don't go to the cause. They make nice. Okay, they will go with the behaviors, they will go with the cognitions, but for some reason, a lot of people in my profession do not like to talk about mommy dearest and daddy dearest, and they don't want to draw up the anger of a patient because if you're dealing with a narcissist, if you're dealing with a borderline, the last thing a therapist wants is borderline narcissistic rage in the treatment room, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And so when you're tapping around at childhood wounds, you might be detonating an original system gone wrong. It's kind of like a minefield. So that's why I have the mind maps so that people can literally have a process to identify childhood wounds, how you react to them, how they encode in you, and then work through the feelings with mommy and daddy in the context of what I call truth dialogues with the therapist. So, in other words, the therapist becomes mommy and daddy. So, in this particular healing system, we encourage patients to project their feelings back onto the cause and not onto the therapist. And if they start projecting heavily on the therapist and demeaning and devaluing and destroying the therapy, then it is in the best interest of both the therapist and the patient to step away from the therapy and direct them to another mode of treatment and end the therapy, because nobody can be helped if they're going to be demeaned, devalued, and destroyed and detonated and put in harm's way. Then you're basically dysfunctional to that individual.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
why do
Okay.
most therapists make nice? Because they don't want to get into the heavy duty poison. Understood?
Yes, yes, I totally understand.
Yeah.
And yes, when before I call him, I felt a little bit better. But after I called him and I started my sessions with him, and I think that he opened up the wounds, and it hurts, and he couldn't manage to heal them. I
You
feel worse.
Well, this is the point is that what's missing, in my opinion, and a lot of my colleagues might not like me saying this, but I march to my own tune, is that most therapies don't have a very strong treatment plan. And even if they do, cognitive therapy is a treatment plan, but in my opinion, it's treating the cognitions. It's not treating the preverbal injuries. Psychoanalysis has a treatment plan, which is come into the office, project all over the therapist, use the therapist as a blank slate. That's one form of psychoanalysis. And then over the years, the analyst will analyze back what it is that is being projected on. Too slow for my taste, okay? So what do I do about this? What does the team do about this? We just go right in there, and instead of waiting 2 years to find out what your childhood wounds are through your projections, why don't we just ask you? So, were you physically abused? Were you sexually abused? Were you verbally abused? Were you neglected? Were you smothered? So it's a very clear plan. It takes place in 10 sessions. Obviously, people who are very emotionally dysregulated, suffering from BPD or NPD, will need follow-up, will need some more work to work through this, and sometimes they will abort the therapy several times. I have some people who will call me a year later and say, can I have another chance at this? And if enough time has gone by and I feel that they're very sincere, here's how I put it to them now after being around the block a few times. I say to them, look, here's the deal. You cannot demean, devalue, destroy, insult the therapist, whether it be me or anybody else on the team. Okay, that's just a contract. Okay. Number two, we teach people coming into the system to become enemies of the old self that is destructive to themselves and to other people. So it's kind of like they have to be part of our team to go against the part that we want to heal. Okay. Does that make sense? So I'm thinking your therapist is no different than most people. He just doesn't want to touch. He doesn't want to touch the bomb.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
This is the exact phrase.
So do you have a copy of my book, Be the Cause: Healing Human Disconnect?
Yes, I have them, but I have lots of books to read, and yes, I will definitely read them. The wounds are opened up, and I should quickly do something about it.
Yeah.
And may I ask my second question?
Of course. Do you have time? Of course, yes.
Yes, and my second question is about the healing process itself. Some of the books and my psychologist told me that I should do it alone. I should treat myself better, and I should do it alone. It's on me, I think that I need someone else, not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, someone else, someone like a friend who can help me. I wanted to know if it is valid or not. I should ask for someone else's help or not.
Okay, so the friend part I disagree with. The friend is somebody who is going to be your friend and maybe give you a little bit of feedback. You don't heal with a friend because it's going to be quite a burden on your friend to take you through the process. Healing alone, look, we didn't get injured alone, so I think that we need an outside person to help us give birth, so to speak, to the pain and release the pain. And that person has to know what they're doing. They have to navigate your journey to healing. And that includes helping to take the poison out. So again, I think we are wired to connect. And when you have another person who becomes your enlightened witness, knows the pathway to healing and can take you from, through, to, from your wounds of childhood and decode them and then paradigm shift you out, then that person can become your enlightened witness to the pain and you don't feel so alone. So you're aware that Yitz is going to be conducting a narcissistic abuse seminar starting February 10th, and you are aware that we do Skype therapy. And tonight, I'm reminding everybody, is the last day to purchase the Mind Map video series, which is an 8 to 10 hour video series of me standing in front of my mind map, explaining every step of the way of the process. presenting you with a case study and teaching you the peaceful healing dialogue. And I think it's a very useful way. I still think that human-to-human connection is important because we can be injured by humans, but we can also be helped by human beings.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're
Thank you
very
very much for
welcome.
the time and picking up the phone.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Good night.
Goodbye. Good night.
Okay. All right. So there's a lot of pain out there, and I'm reminding everyone it's not your fault. However, it is your responsibility to heal, because unhealed people will project and they'll hurt themselves, they'll hurt other people, and we can't just use other people to try to mitigate our pain, whether we're using them as objects or we're using them to become codependent on and lean on. Either way, it's going to be a detonating situation. So I want to talk a little bit about the narcissistic rage, and we might have time for another call or two. So, according to adding to the devastation, narcissists never take responsibility. Rather, they project their own irrational attacking behavior onto the others they have traumatized, typically a scapegoat child or partner, further increasing the abused person's trauma. In the narcissist's own eyes, she or he always feels like the victim, never the victimizer, and the behavior is always justified. The narcissist rage is the flip side of his narcissistic injury. That makes sense. It's kind of like psychological accounting here. An early childhood deprivation thought to arise from having a highly sensitive nature in an invalidating, possibly abusive, neglectful, or overindulgent home environment is usually the cause. Such a child fails to develop a resilient sense of self or emotional skills beyond primitive reactions. And remember, the system gone wrong is that instead of the child being acknowledged for him or herself, the child is groomed to serve the parent's emotions. So with that system gone wrong, it is making all the sense in the world why they would want to defend themselves and guard their heart and not get close to people and learn how to use people as objects. The narcissist is a complex picture of grandiose entitlement and constant defensiveness against real or perceived threats to inflated and at the same time fragile identity. The overt narcissist duality of superiority and vulnerability is expressed aggressively through arrogance and a host of manipulative abuses such as competitiveness, ridicule, shame, blame, denial, designed to deflect responsibility and get her way. And I would add control here. The introverted or covert narcissist has the same self-contradictions and ruthless agenda, but manipulates more passive-aggressively through guilt trips, sulking, silent treatment, and displays of self-pity and unjust victimization. Okay, so we do have time for another call or two, so please feel free to call in, 323-843-2826. And let's talk about couples therapy. A lot of times I will see a borderline and a narcissist get together. And what the Freud is going on here? Well, what the Freud is going on here is that the borderline personality suffering from abandonment issues and the narcissistic personality disorder suffering from a false sense of self and the need to control get together. And as soon as the borderline is felt to be abandoned, and it's really easy for that person to be activated in the core injury of abandonment, then the person will start becoming more clingy and more desperate for attention, and then the narcissist will start pulling away And the borderline wants to, in essence, get closer and closer. The narcissist wants to get further and further, and it truly is a match made in hell. And so Mr. and Mrs. Emotionally unavailable meets Mr. or Mrs. Emotionally desperate and needy, and they trigger each other, and then they end up in panel 4, 5, and 6 is where the breakdown occurs. And the breakdown could be anywhere from the borderline rage to the narcissistic rage to examples of domestic violence or implosions like cutting or suicidality or homicidality or any combination of that. So it becomes very, very intense. And it's intense because when we get in relationships, that relationship is another opportunity to heal. And if that person is not healed going into the relationship and leans too hard on that other person to do the healing, a real big mess will be created. So anybody want to call in and share their experience with living with borderline personality, living with narcissistic personality disorder, or experiencing what it's like to be devastated by a narcissist or devastated by a borderline rage? Please share, okay? And I want to read a little bit more about the link between borderline personality disorder and anger. Okay, this is by Crystalline Salters Pednote, November 5th, 2018. Intense appropriate anger is one of the most troubling symptoms of BPD. It's so intense that it's often referred to as borderline rage. Even so, while anger is a key feature of BPD, very little is known about why people with BPD experience anger differently. Okay, so this is this person's opinion. Borderline anger is more than just a standard emotional reaction. It's described as inappropriate, intense anger, or difficulty controlling emotions. I refer it as difficulty regulating emotions, because who's supposed to regulate our emotions? Well, our mothers are supposed to our primary caregivers are supposed to regulate our emotions. And if we don't get secure attachment, if we don't get eye contact, skin contact, breastfeeding, good enough parenting, and so on, then we become dysregulated. And what we oftentimes do, is you can know by the title of the show, WTF, we do a WTF, or what the Freud. We repeat the pattern. So the borderline who is prone to abandonment will choose a rejecting, cold partner. And that will play out in panel 4, 5, 6. Research on anger and BPD. While BPD anger has long been a topic of debate, it has only recently become a focus of careful research. Experts are now examining how BPD anger is different than normal anger and why it occurs. They are trying to understand whether it is that people with BPD are more easily angered, or have more intense anger responses, or have more prolonged anger responses. One study examined anger in people with BPD compared to those without. They found that people with BPD reported the same level of anger as the healthy controls, but the anger controls reported their anger decreased more quickly over time. So that's interesting. So in other words, they can't really get grounded as quickly as people experiencing anger in general who have had more secure levels of attachment. But again, from a mind map perspective, the core of the BPD individual, the boundaries have been violated. Whether they've been physically abused or sexually abused or emotionally abused, those boundaries are violated and they don't know how to protect themselves. So when they get around people, they're easily penetrable and they easily get detonated and devastated. So with that said, can you all understand a little bit more clearly why the core injury of the narcissist and the core injury of the borderline are so somehow attracted to each other in a WTF manner? And can you understand why the core injury of being either overinflated and overvalued or put down and used by the parent would create such intense rage? So when you're looking at people from a new, hopefully fresh lens of perception, and if you can bring yourself to not judge, blame, shame, or criticize them, then you could see the injury, which doesn't mean that you have to pair up with them and expose yourself to them. As a matter of fact, there was something that I had outlined here about, let's see if I could quickly find it. I hope I can. It was about 10 ways to protect yourself from a narcissist. Well, okay, so I'll say how I think you should protect yourself. Okay, so protection layer number 1, look out for the signs of NPD or BPD. If a person is emotionally dysregulated, if you feel like you're being parasited, if you feel that you're not having synergy with that person, which is panel number 7, where there's a sharing, there's a caring, there's a sense of humanity, there's a sense of emotional balance, then how about working on yourself so that you don't get involved in that dynamic? Oh, here it is. Okay, I believe this is from Ross Rosenberg, one of the people that talks about narcissistic injuries. And let me see here. 10 tips to protect yourself from a narcissistic injury. Always protect yourself and your children from unacceptable harm that results from the narcissistic injury. If necessary, contact the police. So when people violate you and go out of control, you can no longer be therapeutic to them. Now this is outside your realm and in the realm of the law. Remember, narcissistic injuries are rarely about you, but rather about the narcissist himself. And I'll also include borderline here. If somebody's acting out on you so severely, back away. And if they still violate your boundaries, you're going to have to get the law involved. It's called a restraining order. It's called cease and desist, and definitely protect yourself. Apply my observe, don't absorb technique. And I agree with that. Observe, but don't absorb, meaning don't make it about you. Understand that that person is in extreme pain and suffering, and you don't want to be around their projections. As much as possible, don't react defensively. I would say step away. Whenever possible, find an escape route because their projections can be intense. Find a good therapist who can help you uncover why you've subjected yourself to the narcissist's harmful treatment. So this is a time for you to self-reflect and self-correct. I know there are some people out there who are very kind-hearted and they want to be helpful. And so sometimes they get involved with people who cannot control their boundaries. And so you have to step away. When in psychotherapy, consider discussing how and why the absence of self-love and core shame is at the root of your codependency, or at the root, I would say, of your inability to connect with people and create synergy with others. So I hope you've learned something about narcissistic rage and borderline rage. And while it's important to have empathy for people, it's also really important not to engage at the cost of yourself. So I'm going to go to the Shrink the Tune portion of the show. And let me see if I can find that now that I've mixed all the papers up. Hopefully I can. And let me see if I can do that with the last few minutes. And again, feel free to call in and ask for a free consultation, a download of the book, and join my mind map once a month graduate seminar if you are indeed a graduate of the mind map system, and join Yitz Epstein's a group webinar and seminar actually that he does live in Sherman Oaks every Sunday, 7 to 8:30 p.m. So here's this tune. Demi Lovato, I hate you, don't leave me. Hey, yeah, I hate you. Don't leave me. I feel like I can't breathe. Just hold me. Don't touch me. And I want you to love me, but I need you to trust me. Stay with me. Set me free. But I can't back down. No, I can't deny that I'm staying now because I can't decide. Confused and scared. I'm terrified of you. So this sounds more like the borderline. They don't want to be left, yet they can't really engage in a healthy relationship. They get terrified of intimacy, as does the narcissist. The narcissist feels like they're going to lose themselves in an intimate relationship. And the borderline knows that he or she may lose him or herself in an intimate relationship. I admit I'm in and out of my head. Don't listen to a single word I've said. That's the regret, because once the projection is out, then the shame and the blame may come in, especially for the borderline, not so much for the narcissist. Just hear me out before you run away, because I can't take this pain. You are not anybody's punching bag, okay? It's not your obligation to deal with the pain of their cause. So if they have a cause behind the pain, which everyone does, they have to go back and process that through. Not okay to project it on you. And that rhymes, so hopefully you'll remember that. But I can't back down. No, I can't deny that I'm staying now because I can't decide. Confused and scared. I'm terrified of you. I admit I'm in and out of my head. That's the dissociation. Don't listen to a single word I've said because I can't take this pain. No, I'm addicted to the madness. I'm a daughter of the sadness. I've been here too many times before. Abandoned, and I'm scared now. I can't handle another fallout. I'm fragile, just washed up upon the shore. They forget me, don't see me. When they love me, they leave me. I admit I'm in and out of my head. Don't listen to a single word I've said. So you can hear the dysregulation, and it's not anyone's job to regulate such level of dysregulation. They need to be in treatment, and hopefully they need to be in treatment with someone who is good at emotional dysregulation. And sometimes before doing the mind map therapy, if the person is so emotionally dysregulated, they need to get that cleared up first before they start the journey. And some people who are narcissistic in nature don't even want to open that wound up because they don't want to disrupt the false sense of self. So please feel free to call in, ask for a free copy of the book. And remember, today's the last day to buy the Mind Map video series at a discount of $195. And thank you very much for tuning in. Good night, everybody.